and welcome to the first ever podcast of Art and Business and Murals. And I'm your host, Sarah Scully. I'm a street artist based on the Sunshine Coast in Australia, and I also paint artworks and murals and run workshops, and I'm an artist mentor, and you know what it's like being creative, all the things. So this is the first episode, and now I'm going to start off by telling you the absolute truth, and that is I don't know what I'm doing. And this is about the 9th time I've recorded this first episode, because I keep recording it and then listening to it back and thinking, oh, I should have told them about this. Oh, that doesn't sound right. And gosh, you say a lot, Sarah. And I keep recording it and recording it and recording it. And I have recorded it so many times that I haven't ever moved on to episode 2. So if I ever want this podcast to be released into the world, this is going to have to be the episode that I finally upload. So there will probably be mistakes in here. There will probably be me saying a lot. There may even be lots of pauses where you can probably imagine my brain is going, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to say. Because this is the first time I've recorded and it's not been a video and it's not been writing a blog post, and this is harder than I thought. So let's try and go on this journey together and just excuse all the faux pas that I will inevitably make. So I thought I'd start this first episode out by telling you why I wanted to start a podcast, and then giving you a bit of background around who I am, where I've come from, and where I'm going, and talk about my values. And hopefully we align a little bit, because the aim of this podcast is to make you feel less alone. I know that working as a creative can be a pretty lonely space. You might be in your studio by yourself a lot, which can be fun. A lot of us are introverts. But there are times when you just need to know that you're not going through this by yourself, and that you may make mistakes, and it's nice to know that other people are making the same mistakes, and you may not know what type of marketing to do, and you want to hear what other people are doing and what's worked and what hasn't worked. Save yourself some time, essentially. I am an open book, so I will tell you every mistake that I've made, because I hope that you don't have to make the same mistakes I've made. If I can save other people time and embarrassment, then I will, generally by embarrassing myself. So I'm very transparent around my career and all the mistakes I've made and all the accomplishments. I'm not as good as talking about the accomplishments, but I will try and share as much as I possibly can. Because for me, I had the idea of this podcast because at the beginning of this year, I had a midlife crisis / burnout / exhaustion, where I was given a space by the local council for 4 weeks. They gave me a space, they gave me a mentor, they gave me money to be there, and they said, do whatever you want. All you've got to do is talk about it at the end of the month, and that's it. You don't have to have any definite outcomes. You can do what you want. And I lost my marbles. I ended up in the fetal position in the studio, not knowing what to do, because I didn't know what I wanted. And I realized that the last 20 years of my creative career, I've been creating for everyone else except for me. Even when I was in the studio by myself painting a work that I thought was for me, still in the back of my head, I'm like, who's going to buy this? What color are their cushions on their couch? What's the trending color at the moment? What animal can I paint that I know will sell? And it's all about the buyer or the target market or the client or the workshop participants. It's all about everyone else. And when I had the opportunity to do something for me, I had lost myself as a creative, and I'd lost my way, and I'd been stuck in the same pattern for so long. And I just kind of felt pretty alone. So the one thing that really brought me back out of that was spending a lot of time with creatives. So I was lucky to be in a studio where there are other creatives, and they were also sympathetic and had been exactly through what I was going through. And they said that most people that did that residency also ended up in the fetal position crying. So that was nice to know. Not nice to know that other people were struggling, but nice to know that I wasn't the only one. And I ended up calling a lot of my friends who were street artists and having a chat to them. And all of them were saying they'd all been through the same thing. They'd all had that burnout, that exhaustion, and that complete lack of creative flow. And they'd been stuck in that position. So I was asking them what they did to get out, how long it lasted for. And it was just really nice to know that I wasn't alone and I wasn't a weirdo crying in the corner over here by myself, and that other people have been through it. So that's what I want this podcast to be for you. And just, so that we can all have a giggle now, and it wasn't a giggle at the time. I did do the presentation at the end of the 4 weeks. I didn't present much, but I managed to cry my way through my 10-minute presentation, the whole time crying. And then people in the crowd started crying. So that was a fun time. So I also wanted this podcast to teach everyone what I know. There's no point in me hanging on to everything that I know and everything I've experienced. No one wins from that. I'm a chatterbox. I like to talk to people. So why not share everything I know? And if that helps someone else, then fantastic. And if it bores other people, then maybe they could listen to a different podcast, and that's fine. I'm very transparent as a person. So I'm happy to share anything and everything, even if it's inappropriate. And I will probably most likely talk about poo way more times than needs to be spoken about on an art and mural and business podcast. But that's just me. And I will overshare. And if that is making you feel uncomfortable, that's what makes good podcasts, right? It'll be fine. So the plan for this podcast is to run it for a season. How long is a season? I don't know. It could be until I burn out next and don't have the energy to do it. I don't know. It could be 6 months. It could be 6 weeks. I don't know how long it is. It all depends on if it makes a difference. I could be putting this podcast out there and it could be listened to my 2 uncles who are wonderful supporters and my mum, and that could be it. And to me, that's not really successful because none of those 3 people are creatives, although I do appreciate the support. What I would like is to put this information out there and to know that it's supporting and helping other artists. And for me, that's a success. So much like everything else in my career, and I'm sure your career, it's an experiment. So this podcast is an experiment on whether it's worth the time and the energy and the effort, and if it's paying off for other creatives. So that's what's important to me. So we'll set a time and jump back and see if the feedback is there, and I'll let you know at the end of the season, which I don't know when it is. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of a background as to my creative journey and my values and where I hope to be going in the future. So I started in Brisbane, Australia. That's where I grew up. And after school, I went and studied arts because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I ended up studying things like criminology and bits of law and art history and a whole bunch of stuff that I don't even remember because I never really showed up. And then after a year of that, my art teacher who I ran into suggested I study graphic design. And I was like, what's graphic design? So I looked it up and I thought, oh yeah, I'd be really good at that. That's creative, but still a little bit of the income. And so I went and studied graphic design at the Griffith University's Queensland College of Art. And part of my degree, I studied at the Edinburgh College of Art over in Scotland. I studied 6 months over there on scholarship, which was fantastic because it meant that I got to play with a letterpress, which I didn't have the opportunity to in Brisbane. I don't think that at the time there was no letterpresses in Brisbane that you could get your hands on unless you were a printer. I made heaps of friends, which was fantastic. And it meant that my portfolio when I came out the other end of my degree was a little bit different from the 300 other graphic designers that were graduating at the same time from that same uni. So I highly recommend that. If you can get a scholarship to study overseas, then by all means do that. Although that was the first time I lived away from home and I ate so much macaroni and cheese and drank so much beer that I came back like this little butterball. So maybe educate yourself on how to cook for yourself before you leave home. That's another hot tip. So when I came back, I graduated from uni with the babillion other graphic designers and really struggled to find a full-time job. And I ended up working a million different freelance jobs in some really bizarre places. Like I worked for a horse magazine designing horse sperm ads. And then I worked for a company that made public toilets like that went into playgrounds. That was an odd one. I worked for a couple of magazines. I did freelance work, so I picked up some freelance clients. I worked for Queensland Institute of Medical Research in their photography lab. That was fun. Also, my parents happened to work there because they're scientists. So myself, my mum, and my dad would all be there for morning tea, and they worked there for most of their careers. So everyone would be doing the, oh, Sarah, look at you all grown up. I haven't seen you since you were this high. So that was nice. And then I started teaching at the Design College Australia, and I was teaching the Adobe Suite then, which was unusual because I was only like 22, 23 years old, and teaching people essentially the same age as me, maybe a little bit younger, how to be a graphic designer when I was only just a graphic designer. But I did know the programs quite well, which was fantastic. And then I decided that I wanted to work overseas, that if I couldn't get a full-time job in Brisbane, then I would get a full-time job in New York, because that's where all the creatives went. So I put my portfolio up online, and I got a call from a business development manager one day, just out of the blue, who was like, I've got an art director position for you. It's in Shanghai. And I was like, oh, that's not New York. And he was like, yeah, it's like the New York of Asia. It's not, but I believed him. So they paid for me to go over there. They paid for 2 weeks accommodation, and obviously was paying my wage. So I headed over there and got fired after 3 months, which I'm told is normal. But it's still not fun when it happens to you and you don't speak Mandarin and you don't have any friends and you don't have any money and you don't have a job and you're kind of stuck in a different country. And I refused to come home because I didn't want to be seen as a failure. So I stuck it out there and ended up getting my own freelance clients and started up my own studio with 4 other expat friends called The Studio, which I believe is still there in Shanghai today, still running. And I ended up living there for 3 years, running my own business. I worked with some amazing graphic design clients. I worked with Nike and Ballantine's Whiskey. I worked with publicists. I worked with some great projects that I just would not have been able to work on as a freelancer here in Australia. So it was an amazing experience. On top of that, I made some great friends as well. And then when I was in Shanghai, I had one of my clients who owned a bar come to the studio and saw a bunch of my artworks. And he said, well, why don't you exhibit these in an art show? You can have my bar for the night and just put them around the bar. So I had my first solo show in a local bar in Shanghai, and it sold out. And I was in shock. Like I didn't think that it was possible to make a living from selling my art. And after that, I just went crazy painting. I painted tons. I had another show when I was there, which again did really, really well. It didn't sell out, but it still showed me that there's a market there. While I was also in Shanghai, I had a few design clients that were like, oh, why don't you paint a mural? We've got a 2-level building. Why don't you paint a mural here? So my first ever mural job was paid, which I'm very fortunate for. And it was actually 8 murals across 2 levels of a company in Shanghai. So it was a big job. And I have this habit of saying yes to everything and then figuring out how to do it later. So that project was very much a figure out how to do a later project. But we did it and it turned out great. So yay for my first project, or first big mural, I should say. So after 3 years in Shanghai, I burnt myself out a little bit. I was really fortunate to have made a fair bit of money so that I could then take a year off. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to come home to Australia yet. So I moved to San Diego for a year. I have dual citizenship because I was born in the States to Australian parents. So I moved over there using my American passport, and I just did nothing really. I painted. I was in a few group shows, or I had one solo show when I was there too. I surfed a lot, and ate tacos and drank tequila and rested because I'd really burnt myself out. again, you'll realize there's a burnout pattern going throughout my entire career. So it generally is the catalyst to changes. So I took that year off, and then at the end of the year, I thought, okay, I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to move home, and like all my friends, I'm going to do it. I'm going to grow up, and I'm going to do all the grown up things that's expected of me, you know, like marriage and families and houses. And I kind of wish that I didn't have that expectation of myself. I wish that I had not stuck to the societal norms, but you can't go back. So that's okay. I probably would have been a lot less harsh on myself, but that's okay. I moved back to Brisbane, Australia, and I got a job as a full-time graphic designer because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to make a full-time living back in Brisbane with the cost of living here. It just wasn't really sustainable. So I jumped straight into the full-time job, and I went back to my alma mater and worked at Griffith University for a year, which was fantastic. I loved it. That was probably my favorite job of all time. And I spent a lot of time, I feel like just having fun there. Like it was fun. And I was there for a couple of years and bought a small townhouse and was really struggling with the mortgage payments. And the money that I was making, I was struggling to pay all the bills. So I had to change jobs, and I moved to a construction job which paid really well, which meant that I was able to pay my mortgage and still pay my bills. But it wasn't, you know, flaming the creative fires within. Doing org charts, as much as it was great to have that wage, I didn't run to work every morning thinking, yes, org charts and maps. Woo. But I was very fortunate that that construction company had a fantastic maternity leave, and I had met my now husband, and we had chosen to have a baby. So I fell pregnant deliberately and gave myself that 12 months of half pay, very fortunate, to kind of get my ducks in a row to be able to step out of that job and into my own business full time. Now, anyone who has had a baby, let's all do a giant collective laugh as to how hard it is with a newborn baby in general, let alone trying to set up a business, trying to make, you know, find clients and build a portfolio and all the other things that come with starting up a business and a baby. Oh my goodness, it was a tough year, probably one of the toughest, but I was really lucky in that I managed to hustle hard enough, because who needs sleep, and get the business up off the ground so that I didn't have to go back to my full-time construction job. I was able to continue working for myself. I was working also teaching at Queensland University of Technology as well. I was teaching graphic design students there. So that was fantastic to supplement my income as well. And I learned a huge amount. And it was fantastic to be around other creatives. You know, when you're in your studio by yourself all the time, it can become pretty lonely. So to be in at the university 1 to 2 days a week was fantastic. So I did that for a little while and have slowly over time, with consistency and vigor, built my business into what it is today, which is essentially my day-to-day is painting murals. I probably do maybe 1 mural every 3 weeks on average. But I don't know why, but I always seem to cram like 3 murals into 2 weeks and then burn out and sleep for a week and then start the cycle again, which is not healthy, but oh well, we'll figure something out. So painting murals, I do a lot of murals in schools, which is probably one of my favorite projects to do. I love working with school students. I run a lot of workshops. I run them for the public. I run a lot of online workshops, and I also, again, love working at the schools and running workshops there. It's easy for me to come in with this bundle of energy for a day and teach them everything I know about stencils or about spray painting or about murals, and then leave at the end of the day. I also paint artworks as well and sell them online. I'm not represented by a gallery. And then I also mentor other artists. So I believe that if I can manage to make a good wage from my business, then other creatives should be able to as well. So one of my huge passions is teaching other creatives how to get all their ideas together and move in the right direction and market themselves and get the word out there and keep consistent and essentially be their coach. And so they keep showing up for their training once a month, and I keep supporting them as best that I can with all the knowledge that I have, because I have been in the industry for over 20 years now, which is insane. And I know I'm so youthful looking. You would never think that I was 42. I know. So my values, which I think are really important to tell you about, because if your values don't really align with my values, maybe this podcast might not be for you. I don't know. But my values are education. I'm very transparent around everything that I teach, and I really like encouraging other people as well. I like to be people's cheerleaders. I want to be the joyful person that comes into the room, not the sad sap that is sad and depressed. I don't want to be like that. I want to be the joyful one. I want to bring energy and kindness and creativity to a space. So for me, in my everyday, my job is to be kind. I want to be good and I want to do good. And that's one of the reasons why I've started this podcast as well, because I believe this is my opportunity to do good. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a background to the podcast, even though it feels like I'm just kind of flailing in the wind with the podcast. Maybe it might not come across that way, but that's what's happening. And then hopefully you've got a little bit of a background as to where I've come from. And hopefully where I'm going, which is more around the education and supporting of artists. So if you have any topics that you would like me to cover, or if you have any artists that you would like me to interview, because my plan is to talk to other artists as well. Obviously, I don't know everything. I only know what I know, and other artists have a huge amount of knowledge that I don't know about, and I want to hear about it, and I will ask the inappropriate questions. Whether they answer them is up to them. So my plan is to interview other artists as well and see how they run their business. So if you have any artists in mind that you'd like me to chat to, please let me know. You can either hit me up on Instagram at Scully Design, and that's Scully, Sculley. Everyone forgets the E. I think Scully Design without the EY is like a boating company or something. Not related. Or you can hit me up by email. You'll more than likely get me on email at sarah@scullydesign.com. Or you can jump over to our website where we will have the notes from this podcast up. And the website is scullydesign.com. So head over there. If you have any questions at all, get in touch. Until next week, I hope you've enjoyed episode 1.